Often when we're on a journey of behaviour change, there are some important relationships that can become somewhat troubled or even dysfunctional along the way. In many relationships where anger, resentment, codependency, or addictive, obsessive and compulsive behaviours have been involved in the past, there are some commonalities in which our general level of communication tends to decline. These issues can show up in every aspect of communication, not just in our communication about the so-called problematic areas of the relationship. Usually when we're stuck in this difficult and uncomfortable type of interpersonal dynamic, both parties develop a tendency to favour negative and sometimes hurtful comments rather than the more empowering positive communication that can actually benefit the situation. We tend to talk at people using you statements rather than talking to them using I statements. This confrontational approach is often perceived as an attack in a way that's seen as blaming by the other party or parties that are involved. In response, this tends to activate a defensive mode of behaviour, and we regularly start to disregard or even invalidate each other's point of view. It's generally at this point in time, both parties simply stop being accountable and refuse to share any type of responsibility for the dynamic that's been created. In many cases, we move any trace of self-accountability from the conversation, and we just sit in a space of blaming each other for the problems we're experiencing at every opportunity we get. The good news is that this unproductive and extremely ineffective communication style can be changed with some pretty minor tweaks. Learning to communicate in what might be a completely new way for some and learning how to listen to others effectively are skills that are important for any journey into self-discovery. This can often lead to significantly improved relationships throughout our lives in general, not just in those areas that are important to us. In order to do something about the way we communicate, we first need to own our current way of doing things. And once we know from which point we're starting, we have a direction we can take to make the changes that we want to make. For the purpose of this particular aspect of the DBT skills training program, we're going to focus on 4 different types of communication to see if we can identify which category we might commonly fall into. Then we're going to define what it means to use the skills of positive communication, something we can easily adapt to be in line with who we want to be in those areas of life that are important to us right now. Take a look at the following list of common communication styles and ask yourself, which one do I use the most in my relationships? Remember, you may communicate in a very effective way when your system's in a safe place, so pay particular attention to how you communicate when you're emotionally activated. There are 4 important areas of interpersonal communication that often get lost when relationships break down. As I said before, both parties have usually stopped using statements that are empowering to each other. No longer are we using the positive statements that begin with I, and the interactions we regularly take part in start degrading rapidly. If we express an understanding of the individual we're dealing with and demonstrate a willingness to share responsibility for the situation, in essence being accountable for the role we play, we can begin to communicate on a different level, which often empowers the other person to follow suit. Keep in mind, in order to effectively use this type of communication, We first need to have the ability to handle the distress that comes into our system when entering into this type of situation. Without the ability to tolerate the distress and identify the story that gets activated in our system, we won't be able to manage the different parts of our personality that are responding to the presence of an uncomfortable and often unwanted emotional experience. This generally means we just cycle into old reactions and then sit in the feelings of guilt and shame that we're left with, wondering, how the hell did I get here? We also need to have a really solid idea of what our objective is going into this interpersonal interaction. If we don't know what it is that we're trying to achieve, we can get lost in the confusion of emotion and end up coming out feeling worse than we did when we first went in. Working through the DBT skills of Dear Man, Give, and Fast can provide the insight we need in this area, and the formula provided for positive communication is designed to be used in conjunction with these skills, along with planning ahead to build mastery so we can be ready for the emotional experience that has challenged us in the past. When it comes to the implementation of our positive communication style, it can be helpful to use the mnemonic known as PIUS to help us remember how to get our communication back on track in times when things are not exactly going how we want them to go. PIUS was actually developed for the Smart Recovery program of addiction support. However, it's extremely relevant for any work being done where communication is believed to be breaking down in relationships, regardless of the reasons for the breakdown. Next, let's take a look at each section of the PIUS skill to build a better understanding for what it is that we need to do to make this skill an effective part of our communication style. It is really important to include positive comments in our conversations and avoid using negative comments wherever it's possible. This not only helps the listener feel more at ease, but it also helps us to remember that we do actually appreciate some things about the individual that we're conversing with. Try to think of something that you really like about them, or if it's the case, just tell them that you love them. When we become conscious of these things, we tend to communicate in a more positive manner. When used appropriately, this can actually be one of the best communication skills that we have available to us. It helps us speak to another person in a way that communicates our needs or wishes without blaming or criticizing them in any way. Remember, when people do feel blamed and criticized, they usually become defensive. As you'll see in the PDF at the bottom of the page that's attached to this particular video, there's a formula that many people find useful when structuring our communication to use I statements. Show that you actually care about the person and that you respect them enough to try to understand their point of view, even if you don't agree with it. Listen to the person. I mean, really listen to them. Understand exactly where it is that they're coming from, and if you don't, ask questions, don't make assumptions. Try to reflect back what you hear in a non-judgmental tone. Understanding the person's point of view will make it easier for you to find some common ground. When you show that you're trying to understand something about another person, they're more likely to accept that you have something important that you want to share with them. In any interaction, it's important to remember that neither party is perfect. Understanding, acknowledging, and being accountable for our part in any problem goes a long way to breaking out of a pattern of conflict. It's extremely rare that one person is 100% responsible for the dynamic in a relationship. So owning the role that we play is essential in the creation of a healthy adult dynamic. Remember, there's a big difference between being accountable for our actions and being responsible for someone else's emotion. In order to be effective in this area of communication, we have to own what it is that we did without taking responsibility to fix how the other person feels. At the bottom of the website page that's connected to this video, you're going to find a worksheet that contains a formula for positive communication. I'll leave some links in the description below. Please remember that this is intended to provide the process that we follow, not the actual language that we use. If you choose to follow this formula to the letter and try to speak this way to people in your life, there is a really high probability that they're going to laugh at you or wonder what's wrong with you, because it'll probably make you sound like a total robot. Take the process that's contained in the formula and adapt it to your own style of language. Also, make sure that you know your audience. If you can be direct, be direct. If you need to be sensitive to the person's emotional reaction, then be sensitive. Part of demonstrating emotional maturity is being able to adapt our behaviors to different social circumstances, not doing the exact same thing all the time and then expecting others to adapt to us. Use the script that's contained in the PDF along with the planning ahead to build mastery skill, and rehearse your conversations over and over again. The only way this style of communication becomes a part of living the life we want to live is when we practice these skills. Then when we think we've practiced enough, we practice them some more. If you want to share your opinion on this or anything else to do with the integration of DBT and schema therapy, leave a comment in the chat below. I'd love to hear your point of view. If you want to know more, come join the live online meetings that I facilitate each week on Zoom. I'll leave some links to those groups in the description below. As always, if you like the content of this video, please subscribe to the channel, smash that like button and turn on those notifications for all the latest from me and the Liberation Place. I hope this video gave you some ideas on how to use the positive communication skills to support you in building your own healthy adult relationships. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Take care, be safe, and be well.